The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us on this autumnal day. Grey, a little bit drizzly, a little bit mild and breezy, which is normality for Britain, and normality is something to celebrate at the moment. So we're going to rip through this as fast as we can. I'm going to just look at the agenda, run through that, and a couple of themes. So we're going to look at cybercrime and what we can do to prevent that, and then having made that commitment to prevent the threat of cybercrime, we're then going to look at how we can display that or get ourselves certified to show interested parties our commitment. A few themes here. One is this is a technical thing, but actually there's an element of change of behavior that's required. Traditionally, or historically, we have responded to crimes by changing our behavior. By perceiving the threat of a crime, we changed our behavior. Yeah, things like turning a light on before we leave a building, locking doors and windows, keeping things out of sight. But cybercrime has evolved so quickly that our perception hasn't alerted us to the threat, and our behavior hasn't changed. And we need to we need to undertake that behavioral change. So don't leave it all to your IT manager. Think about it as something that involves human and technology elements. Also, cybercrime has a direct impact in terms of the cost of data and breaches, but there's also an indirect impact in relation to the effects. So when trying to deal with a criminal breach, there's a potential cost there as well. And a little bit like with the current pandemic, there's an immediate impact of COVID-19 as far as illness and so on, but also there's a cost to society of our attempt to deal with that threat. So going back to cybercrime, one of the first widespread cyber bugs, should we call it, was the love bug virus back in May 2000, which is when people would receive an email purporting to that somebody fancied them, and there'd be an attachment. They click the attachment, that opened their Outlook contacts folder and sent the same thing to everybody in that contacts folder. So maybe typically that back then people might have 200 contacts. That gives you like a infection rate of R, where R is 200, and you can imagine how fast that expanded to such an extent where IT managers actually have to shut the entire computer systems down, and no work was done for a couple of days while they responded to this virus attack. So the other thing I wanted to say is that there isn't a single solution that's going to fit all organizations, depending on the type of transactions, depending on the type of data that's held, depending on the organization, its culture. We need to have a policy and procedure relevant to that organization and its operations. So quick housekeeping. The mics are muted. We're going to keep this to 30 minutes approx, so I'm going to rattle through as fast as I can. Please use the chat if you'd like to, and we'll deal with any questions at the end. So let's look at the history of cybercrime, and we hear a lot about the word hacking. It's worth pointing out that in a way this is simply human behavior, human interest. Engineers have always tried to take things apart and put them back together, understand how they work, put them back together again, and improve them, whether that's a vacuum cleaner or a motorcycle. And electronic engineers throughout the 70s and 80s were hacking systems to do exactly that. Now that's expanded during the 90s when online transactions really took off, and then of course in the noughties with the rise in online banking. And we have sort of three elements of cybercrime. One is governments and their agents. So that element of crime we might call cyber terrorism, for political and commercial disruption. The second element is really activists. Now, they could be benign or malevolent, depends on your point of view, but there is a significant level of activity there. But the area that probably applies to us in small, medium businesses is organized crime. So that's what we're going to focus on here. And I've got a photo there of actually an operation that was raided. I think this was in India. Because there's a tendency to think about cyber criminals as sort of fellas in hoodies in an attic looking at a screen with lines of code, and I think that's probably more appropriate to your sort of activist. Actually, cyber crime is predominantly undertaken by organised crime organisations, which would otherwise be and may also be doing the other criminal activities that make money: trafficking, drugs, people, etc. They have no ethics. And it's another reason why we really do not want to be giving money to these people. So fraud, and particularly using phishing to undertake fraud, is probably the most common way to extort money. I have a contact I know who was purchasing a property, this is 5 years ago, and at the appropriate time she received an email from a solicitor asking for £46,000 to be transferred as a deposit on the house. Everything's fine. Well, except of course it wasn't, because her email had been compromised some time before. The criminals had set up a domain almost exactly the same as the domain of her bona fide solicitor. So when she got the email, she couldn't see that it'd been spoofed. The signature, the sort of the style of the email, everything was appeared to be correct. So the money was transferred into an account, which was then taken, and she never saw it again. Now that loophole has since been closed, because about 18 months ago, the banks finally agreed to check the account number against an account name. But in the meantime, something like £200 million worth of fraud has been lost in this way. Another anecdote: I know of an accountant who thought the email from that purported to be from the CEO asking for an account transfer of £12,000 was legitimate. It wasn't. And we know of an organisation whose email was compromised and consequently sent out invoices. So those invoices were paid, except they were paid into the wrong accounts. And again, significant sums of money were lost. And because these sums of money are significant, because it's kind of embarrassing to be defrauded in these ways, often the crime isn't reported. So when we do see statistics about the size of the scale of cybercrime, be aware that they're probably underestimates. So let's think about other threats to an organization. The organization is effectively devalued. If it gets out that they've had a significant breach, that's going to undermine the brand trust and its reputation. Organizations have their activity completely disrupted, and huge sums of money are lost that way. And then thirdly, there's the direct loss of either intellectual property or money. Looking at ransomware in detail, I've got a slide here. There's a lot of data on it, but I'm just going to draw attention to two things. First of all, on the left here, you can see that in the last 3 years, the amount of ransomware attacks is increasing. And if we look along the top to the organizations that paid ransoms, you can see the percentage is growing. So crime does pay, and therefore it will continue to rise. The other thing I'd quickly say is that if you look at the amount of data that was lost or recovered, it's no better by paying than by not paying. So the key thing is to have appropriate backups. So what kind of information is being stolen? Well, I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but suffice to say that all of this data, even if you think your organization's not going to be of interest to a cyber criminal, it probably is, because data has a value on the black market. And I'm going to talk briefly about this black market in its scale. When we think about the internet, most of us, certainly me, I think anything that I can get through a Google search is the internet. That's the data that's out there, and it's an astonishing amount. Actually, that's only the clear web, the amount of data that's accessible through a standard browser, and it represents about 5% only of the internet. The rest of it is what's known as a deep web. That's to say, it's anything on the internet that's not indexed by and therefore accessible via a search engine like Google. So it could be behind a paywall, it could require sign-in. So estimated like 95% of the internet. And of that, you've got the dark web. So that's data that is used for generally for illicit purposes, because it's intentionally hidden. 5% of the total internet. You can access it using a browser like Tor, but that's the scale of the black market. And back to the scale of the problem. Yeah, there's so much information out there to try to decipher. I settled on two here that seem to be kind of pragmatic. An insurance company, because you'd like to think that they're using data to establish cost of premiums, etc., and UK government, and both are looking at around about 50% of business being attacked in 2019. And it's not just large organizations either. Small and medium businesses are increasing as well. So what can we do to reduce the threat of this? Well, as I mentioned earlier, change in behavior is really critical to this. You can't just rely on the technology. So please make sure that the employees in your organization are regularly trained and then tested and then retrained and retested. And please think about the more vulnerable people in society, maybe your own parents and children, and make them aware of the threats online, and do everything you can to help them guard against those threats. As far as technology, these are the key elements. Endpoint security. Make sure that there's a proper anti-malware involved. And on the subject of malware, I'm going to introduce another word. Well, certainly it was new to me, polymorphic. In other words, malware is constantly changing its form in order to avoid detection. So because it's constantly changing its form, anti-malware must be constantly updated in order to find it. So don't install a piece of anti-malware software, or just assume that the antivirus software that came free with your computer is enough. It isn't. It must be updated regularly. You need a proper professional level, and it needs to be a paid service. So anti-malware, software firewall, and don't think that just because you've got the admin password and without that you can't install anything on the hard drive. Just a threat to if the browser itself is affected, that can be enough to cause major problems. Password hygiene. I know how frustrating it can be to have many passwords and all long, but without that level of security, it's just too easy for criminals to get in and compromise your network or your machine. So you need to have complex passwords. You need to change them. So store them in a password manager and have a separate password, an encrypted password manager for work and a separate one for your personal life. And finally, actually not finally, I want to briefly mention multi-factor authentication, because it's all very well having a complex password, but that can still be hacked. You must set up multi-factor authentication so that if using a different machine, you need a code sent to your phone, which then confirms your identity. And then finally, patching. Operating systems are constantly scrutinized by criminals looking for vulnerabilities that they can utilize. So the providers of those operating systems and those application software products are continually patching them, changing them, improving them to cut out those weaknesses. So you need to make sure that those updates are installed, you're then rebooted to put them into effect. And even products like firewalls, routers, switches, etc., they need to have regular firmware updates, otherwise they're going to be compromised. And then not just one computer is at stake, the whole network. So there we are. That is some discussion about cybercrime and what you can do about it. What I'd like now to do is to pass over the baton to Mark, who works for Brigantia, a specialist cybersecurity distributor. He's going to talk to you about how you can prove your commitment to cybersecurity using a certification called Cyber Essentials, and he's going to talk to you about the organization that runs it and some software that can help you enable a continual audit. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Good morning, everybody. As Ralph said, my name is Mark Buddery. I am the product specialist at Brigantia who looks after CyberSmart. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what Cyber Essentials is, what Cyber Essentials Plus is, IASME, who are the consortium who govern these two certifications, and I will explain that acronym to you in a moment. I'll also take you through what CyberSmart is and, of course, how that makes our lives easier, which is the, I guess, general point of what I want to get across today. So, Cyber Essentials then. Cyber Essentials is a framework which was a kind of made by the government and the NCSC. The NCSC stands for National Cybersecurity Centre. And this collaboration was first introduced on the 5th of June 2014. Now, this has been specifically designed to decrease the ever-growing number of cyber threats, costs of cyber threats that affect the UK business directly. The statistics you see from what Ralph had shown just a few moments ago. This certification represents a framework. That framework has 5 controls. Those 5 controls are firewall, secure configuration, password protection, malware protection, and patch management. Now, don't worry too much if you don't know what all of those are or don't completely understand what all of those are. Cubit Technology will be on hand post this webinar on a one-to-one sort of basis to explain exactly what that is to you. When this was first introduced, it was predicted that this framework would prevent somewhere around 80% of all or most common cyber attacks which affect the UK. Thanks to the University of Lancaster, they conducted an independent study and they've proven that anybody that holds the certificate and is able to maintain that framework on as often as humanly possible are actually getting the benefit of 99.3% protection. So it's vastly more effective than even the creators thought it would be. So it's a very, very impressive setup and very impressive framework. However, to achieve the 99.3% protection doesn't stop at achieving the certificate. If you do just achieve that certificate, unfortunately, in most cases, you will be left just holding that, a piece of paper which says you have been certified. To get the benefit of that 99.3% protection, you have to be in a position to monitor that framework and those 5 controls on a daily basis. You need to know when one of those controls has failed so that they can be remediated. And of course, that's something Cubit Technology will discuss with you. The good news for you is this is a highly recognized qualification. Consumers, customers, just like ourselves, are becoming more and more savvy around this subject, mainly because it's spent a lot more time in the news than it perhaps ever has in the last few months. And they are caring more about how their data is stored. You being able to prove that you hold this certificate shows that you are taking their data privacy and their data security very, very seriously. So let's talk about Cyber Essentials Plus. So just before I get into this, I'm going to talk very briefly about the differences between the two. So Cyber Essentials is effectively a questionnaire. That questionnaire is going to be detailing your environment, your network, your machines, all your devices, etc. That's done by Cubit Technology and yourselves, as I said, completing this questionnaire. Cyber Essentials Plus, however, whereas this does follow the same framework, it will find the information in a vastly different way. So the framework, as I said, remains the same. Firewall, secure configuration, password protection, malware protection, and patch management. The main difference here is, as I alluded to, is how that information is found. So this is done by an independent third-party IASME accredited auditor, when using CyberSmart, they use their own in-house accredited auditors to conduct a report. It's effectively a vulnerability scan, which scans your entire network and builds a report and gives us an idea as to exactly what your network currently looks like in terms of the Cyber Essentials framework. It's held in a much higher regard, purely by how the information is found. You can probably appreciate if the person trying to achieve the certificate is filling in their own information, it does leave the opportunity for misinformation, whether deliberately or accidentally. So that's why when you can show that you have this, anybody that knows anything about this will understand that that is legitimate information. From June 2021, Cyber Essentials Plus will become the new minimum standard. So for the last 6 years or so, Cyber Essentials has been kind of the mandatory standard, and Cyber Essentials Plus has been going the extra mile. That's changing. June 2021, Cyber Essentials Plus will become the new minimum standard. I will just caveat that though, with everything that's going on in the world, there is a chance that date will move. So I'm not going to tell you that that is set in stone for the moment, but it is definitely something to be aware of. Much like Cyber Essentials, achieving 99.3% protection through Cyber Essentials Plus is operated in the exact same way. You have to have an ongoing compliance monitoring application of some sorts, feeding back this information to you so you know those 5 controls are in place as often as humanly possible. And much like a similar point, this is held in much higher regard through public knowledge. People who understand what Cyber Essentials is and Cyber Essentials Plus is will know you have gone the extra mile and you are putting in the extra effort to make sure you are protecting your clients, which is of course hugely important. So IASME are the governing body who look after all of this. IASME stands for Information Assurance for Small and Medium Enterprises. Now, it is their job to police all of this, whereas this is a government kind of creation. IASME have been given the authority to maintain certification. They decide how it's obtained. They decide who gets certificates. They decide if there's going to be audits. They are effectively in control of every aspect of this on behalf of our government and the NCSC. One of the biggest changes they've made this year is previously you could obtain a certificate on day one, and then in 364 days time, that would be the very next time anybody has any idea of the status of your compliance. Much like an MOT certificate. You go and get your car MOT'd, you get your certificate, you could drive away and your exhaust could fall off as a bad example. You would then no longer be roadworthy, but according to your certificate, you are until you get checked again in a year's time. So to combat that, they have started launching audits. These are completely random. You will have no warning. There is no prejudice as to the size of your company or how many times you've been certified in the past, or even if this is the first time you've been certified. We are all at risk of this audit. We're going to have a very short time frame to respond to it, and failures will result in losing any certificates we do hold. IASME also offer a GDPR readiness module. Now, this will not grant you a kind of like a GDPR compliance certificate of sorts, but it will start you along your way in achieving that ever so slightly higher accreditation around that GDPR module itself. CyberSmart do have their own addition to this, which I will talk to you about a little bit later. IASME then are, of course, one reason why we need to make sure we've got ongoing compliance monitoring. If we use the CyberSmart endpoint application, for example, that's a fully reportable tool. So in the event of an audit, there will be no issue with getting that report off to IASME in a very timely manner, which of course is very important. The way it effectively works is Cubit Technology can set up alerts for your specific organization. So should any one of those 5 controls fail, they will be alerted in near real time. That means they can remediate that as quickly as they possibly can, if that's the agreement they of course have with you. So when that audit does come around, the chances are there won't be anything left to remediate, and it's a simple case of running that report and getting it off to IASME. IASME recognise CyberSmart as a key partner for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. What that effectively means is because they work so closely, they are going to always have the most up-to-date information. They will have the information that isn't quite public knowledge yet. So they are a fantastic vendor to partner with. They are at the forefront of any changes and everything that is going on. So that leads me quite nicely then onto CyberSmart. So CyberSmart has been created for the want to make this process as easy as possible for everybody involved. It automates as much as it can. And they are, as I said, as they work so closely, they are bringing that information to the public often a lot sooner than anybody else. So what do you get with CyberSmart? It's fast-tracked discovery, remediation, and certification. You get a 100% pass guarantee, which is the important part here. So when you are completing a questionnaire, and once you have submitted that questionnaire, it doesn't go directly to IASME. And that's exactly the same with an auditor conducting a report for a Cyber Essentials Plus certification. It first of all goes directly to CyberSmart. They have their own team of in-house IASME accredited auditors, and they will look over everything. If anything's wrong and anything will fail, that will get pushed back to the relevant parties, and they will work with them to fix those issues. And it will only go to IASME when everybody is 100% happy it will pass. Once that does happen, you will have your certificate back ready to download within 24 hours. The quickest they've done it so far is 20 minutes. So it's a very impressive service. The ongoing compliance monitoring app, this is genuinely a world-leading endpoint application. It will be feeding back information from your company's devices every 15 minutes to a centralized portal. And I will show some examples of this in a few slides' time. That gives Cubit Technology as much information as they can possibly handle to make sure that you are looked after in every aspect of your Cyber Essentials. So there is a very small chance that you will ever run into any issues when it comes to things like audit, etc. It gives you the power to compete. Holding one of these certificates in some cases is mandatory for some of our clients, and some of you possibly on this webinar. It is mandatory. You will have to have this to continue trading, and that counts for government, local government. There's now parts of NHS and there's now schools that do require this. So it will provide you with that power to compete or remain competing. It will give you peace of mind knowing that you have a certification or a compliance program that is giving you 99.3% protection. Means you don't have to necessarily worry so much about your cyber security, because you know you are following a tried and tested and proven guideline which gives you a high level of protection. And CyberSmart are very innovative. Where they started a few years ago to where they are now is quite frankly mind-blowing. That the last 2 years they've introduced so many fantastic features, and that is continuing as we go on. I can't unfortunately share those with you at the moment, but over the coming months there are going to be some fantastic features coming. So this is a bit of an insight as to what the platform looks like. So from Cubit Technology's point of view, they will be able to see every single device. They will be able to see every single individual that's linked to that device and what percentage out of 100 that individual machine is secured. On a previous screen to this, they will be able to see an overall percentage secured for your specific company. They can then come into here to break that down. At the very top here, you'll see users passing 16, users failing 3. This is what they'll use to filter down what they want to see. So of course, they'll be interested in the failings. So they'll click on that, and that will filter down below anybody that is failing, and they can then go into that individual device, and there is some very detailed information which will support them in making sure that that issue is remediated. And of course, using their knowledge and expertise, I'm sure they will get that sorted in an incredibly quick time frame. When we come to reporting, this is the page here. So let's imagine a situation where you've received the IASME audit, you've been given the small time frame, and you've been, I guess, threatened in a sense that if you fail, you will lose your certificates. This is what Cubit Technology will be able to use to provide that report. Now, they can set up notifications so they're alerted when any one of your programs or any one of your controls has failed. So they will most likely, depending on the agreement with yourselves, be dealing with that as quickly as possible. So the chances are, when the audit request comes in and the report needs to be run, this screen will show everything as passing, and it's a simple case of pressing the button and providing the report. So it removes the stress and panic away from everybody. Last thing that I'm going to talk to you about is the CyberSmart smart policies. Now, as we'll all appreciate, everybody's just been sent home again to work from home, unfortunately, thanks to lockdown 2.0. And I imagine as part of what's going on in the world, you may now have to update policies, you may now have to create brand new ones. That's going to be difficult with nobody being in the office. You're not physically going to be able to get somebody to sign saying they've read it. You're going to have to try and get emails out there and monitor the responses to make sure that, as I said, those policies are agreed, met, and followed. You can provide Cubit Technology with a PDF of that policy, which they can load onto this portal and will directly be sent to every single device with this application installed. That means any one of your employees can open up the thumbnail on their machine directly. They can open up any policies. They have to scroll all the way to the bottom before it will accept that they're allowed to say they've read it. And that's a fully reportable system. So it's very easy for you to be able to keep on top of that aspect. There are, of course, a lot more features of what CyberSmart can do, there is obviously quite a bit more detail in Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus and IASME. This has been a brief overview for you to demonstrate what this can do. And I know Cubit Technology are very much looking forward to discussing this around your unique environments. The last thing to say is obviously thank you very much. We appreciate that during this worldwide crisis, time is a bit of a precious commodity. So from Ralph and myself, we would like to thank you for yours.